Thanks for tuning in again for this week's live Q&A. Today we're going to be doing a split. It's also beginner beekeeping. So don't be shy. Ask those beginner questions that you might be afraid to ask, and we'll help answer those by reading out your questions and seeing if we can answer them. No such thing as a silly question. We all started off as new beekeepers once. Looking in the window of this hive, what I can tell straight away is there's a lot of bees, and we're here in the springtime. So it'd be a good idea to relieve the congestion, because if we don't, the hive will split itself and in the form of a swarm, in which case we may lose half the bees if we can't catch that swarm. So we're going to show you. Sophie here has never done this before. She's going to do the split by taking out some of the frames from the bottom box, putting them in this one, and that will relieve that primary trigger of swarming, which is not enough space for the queen to lay eggs down here in the brood box. So any questions, put them in the comments. Give us a thumbs up if you can hear us okay, and if the stream is coming through. Okay, first of all, let's blow some smoke into the hive, and that will have a calming effect on the bees. And you'll need to protect yourself from stings, so putting on your bee suit, wearing your gloves is a good idea. And you can just put the smoker down in front so the returning foragers get a whiff of that smoke. Next, we're going to be cracking off this brood box. So loosening up the corners, which you started to do before, by putting the chisel end in, giving it a good wiggle like that. And across to the next corner, if it hasn't been inspected for a while, the bee's propolis, which is kind of their glue. They collect the propolis from the tree sap and make this glue to glue all the hive parts together, which is super useful. It also has an antimicrobial function for the bees as well, but it means all your hives stay nicely glued together. But it is a bit of a challenge sometimes, if it's really sticky, to get the boxes apart. So Sophie has just put the chisel in, giving it a bit of a wiggle to loosen that up, and hopefully we can then take this box off. What you'll need to do your split is a baseboard, a brood box, a full rack of brood frames, an inner cover and your roof. And that way you'll be all set up to take some frames out of the bottom box, put them in this box. They have eggs or young larvae in their first couple of days. The bees can then turn one of those into a queen, look after them, and they'll grow from there. So that's the aim of the game. There's lots of tips and tricks along the way, so stay tuned in, ask those questions, and we'll read them out as we go as well. So next, we're going to take this box off. Now it's full of bees, it's full of honey, because it's springtime. We've harvested a few frames last week. They're almost full again, so it's going to be heavy. So we can do this together when we do the lift. Take the gabled roof off. If you've got the wing screws screwed in, you'll unscrew them. We can put that out of the way, and there's no need to take the inner cover off. We're going to leave that on, which will keep more bees in that box as we get into the brood box here. So next, I'm going to give myself a little bit of space here just to get in and do the lift. And what we're going to do is loosen up this box and upend it on the railing here. And that will mean it's out of the way for us to access the brood box. Okay. So putting on your bee suit and making sure the zips are well done up. Wear gloves if you're new to beekeeping. After a while you can experiment without. Not wearing gloves means you do get the odd sting on your hand. Okay. Now next we'll see if we've loosened it up. Looks pretty good. So if you use this as a handle here, and then the other handle's at the front. That's it. And we're just going to go forward onto the rail and up like this. Beautiful. So checking that's stable, that's going to stay there, even though it looks like it isn't. And now we're into the brood box. So this is the queen excluder, which stops the queen travelling up because she's a bit bigger. She can't get through this grid. Stops her travelling up and laying eggs in your honey frames. This is a good opportunity now to blow a little more smoke around just to have a calming effect, and we might like to blow a little smoke over here as well, just to maintain that calming effect that smoke has. As you think of your questions, we'll start preparing this split, and the idea is we're going to take some of the frames out of here and put them in the other box. Next, slowly peel off this queen excluder. That's it. And then once we've peeled it off, we'll have a little look on the underside for a queen, because sometimes she can be on the underside of the excluder, and we want to be careful not to orphan her from the hive because she may not make it back again. So having a quick look there, can't see the queen, and good practice to then lean that up against the hive somewhere so that if you did miss her, she can then crawl back onto the hive body and into the hive. Got a bit of a windy day here, not the best day for doing a split, but we're doing it anyway. We're under shelter. If we get a bit of rain, we won't get too wet, and hopefully the bees will behave. But they do tend to get more grumpy on a rainy day, so best times to do things like this, do your brood inspections, do your splits, is on a nice, warm, sunny day, mid-morning to mid-afternoon. Okay, now we're looking into the hive. We can see there is a lot of bees. We can see they're using all the frames. We can see pollen on the hind legs. Look at that there. If you've got questions, put it in the comments. For those that are just tuning in, we're doing a hive split, and it's beginner beekeeping Q&A, so chime in with any questions you have. Don't be afraid to ask. Beautiful big pollen balls. Great to see.
I do have a question here about the queens. Do they come in different sizes? Could a smaller queen fit through the excluder?
Occasionally when the queen is just freshly mated, she can be a bit smaller, and you do get the odd queen that will squeeze through the excluder. If that happens, you can get brood in the flow frames, in which case what you'll need to do if that happens is move her down to the bottom box. The brood won't affect the flow frame, so you will have to wait a few weeks for all of that brood to emerge. The worker brood cycle is 21 days, so you need to wait at least 21 days for any of that brood to emerge, and then your flow frames, the bees can then fill those cells with honey again. So you're waiting about a month if you do get brood in the flow frames and put her back down in the bottom. If you can't find her, easy thing to do is take all your frames out, shake all the bees off into the bottom box, put the excluder back, and put the super back on top. That way all the bees are downstairs and the queen must be down there too. So that's a good hack if you can't find the queen. Okay, next let's use a little bit of smoke to clear some bees away, and you're looking in to see which frame you might like to pull out first. These are all naturally drawn, so you will get more wobbles probably than if you use foundation. Looking in here, you can see quite a lot of them will come up easily. This one's got a bit of burr comb and things, so we'll leave that to go sideways. You might want to choose, say, this one here.
Yeah.
That's it. And you can now grab your Hive tool. Then using it like this, I'll just give you a little demonstration. Between the end bars, you can just loosen. If you don't do this step, you might pull the nails out. So you're just creating a little bit of space between the frames and loosening them. So try that. Oh, that's a good way there. Yep. So beginner beekeeping here. Sophie's never done this before, and she's doing a hive split. She did catch this swarm on the mango tree. It's been performing well this spring. It's been producing a lot of honey, and now it's time to do a hive split to relieve some congestion, and that way they're less likely to swarm. Any questions? Keep them coming.
Yeah, we have a few questions coming through. Ian would like to know, if they add an ideal super, does that reduce the need to split?
Yes, another way to reduce congestion in the brood box is to add more boxes to your hive to increase the hive size. And that's a common technique. If you don't want to take a split, you can add another deep box, another shallow box, either honey or brood. All of them will help add space to the hive. Typically they'll then move some honey up from the bottom, creating more space in the brood box for the queen to lay her eggs. So you can then use the J hive end to take out that frame. That's it. Sophie has done some beekeeping. Here we go. And now, yeah, I'll hold that for you. You can do the other end. It's a little bit of a juggle. So you can swap hands and then use your gloved hand on this side, and then up we come. Lean that back this way, and you just slowly, gently, the first frame is the hardest. That's it. Very nice. And you're just slowly coming up. And what we're seeing already is a nice big patch of brood here, some more brood there, and we're likely to see down in this section eggs or larvae. Now this is a naturally drawn comb and it's well established, so we probably can tilt it over a bit, bearing in mind that when it's first drawn it might be a bit weak and you don't want to tip it over because there is no plastic foundation or wires. However, these frames do accommodate foundation if you do want to use that in your hive. So let's just have a good look down the cells to see what is going on here, because we need to choose some frames to put in our other box that do have eggs down the bottom. So you're going to need to tilt it around to the light, get the light down the cells, and if you wear glasses, this is when you'll need them. I can see a couple of eggs down the cells and I can see some very young larvae. So that could be a good one to move to the other hive because they can then raise a queen from that. But we'll keep going because we may find a queen cell that they're already raising, which would be a head start for the new split. So that could be a good one. I'm going to rest it on the frame rest here. We should have a quick look for the queen. I'd rather leave the queen with the parent colony. If you're doing a walk-away split, not adding a queen, then you don't actually need to find her, but unless you do want to leave her in one box or the other. Generally, I like to keep the hive strong, keep the queen with the parent hive, and make a weaker split that you then nurse into being a strong colony. Okay,
the question we have here is, are we splitting the hive to double it?
We're splitting the hive to create another hive. It's a great thing to do in the springtime because it does relieve the primary trigger of swarming, which is not enough space in the hive. So you're taking bees away, you're taking brood away, you're taking some of the resources away, and then your hive will be much less likely to swarm, and you end up with another hive, which if you don't want one, somebody else surely will. So it's a great thing to do in order to either increase the size of your apiary or give somebody else a start in beekeeping. Okay, you can go ahead and pull out the next frame. So go sideways again first.
You think this one?
Yes.
Yep.
You can go either one, but let's keep going towards this area. Generally they'll keep the brood more central and the honey towards the edge, so we're likely to find more honey frames as we go towards the edges. Keep the questions coming in. If you've got a question, chime in.
Yeah, we have a question from Michelle. She's saying she put an extra brood box on her hive last year. Now she'd like to split that back to one brood box each. How does she go about this?
Okay, so you can use that strategically to create your split. So the configuration is you've got one brood box, you've got two brood boxes, and then perhaps your flow super on top of that. Now, if you want to take a split, you could then use that second brood box to be your split by shuffling the resources A and B. So you would take the super off, move the second box onto another base like this, then you'll be taking some brood frames from here and putting them into here and making sure both boxes have brood, have resources, and you can then decide on which one the queen is in if you can find her. If you can't, just make sure they both have eggs down some cells. The one without the queen will go ahead and raise one, usually. Okay, what have you found?
I see some eggs in this one.
You see some eggs? Well done. So down the cells you'll see a tiny little grain of rice, and that's what you're looking for. And I'm seeing a lot of very young brood. Here, give us a thumbs up if you can see what looks like white crescent moons down the cells. They're the larvae, some people call them grubs, and that's the bees going through their caterpillar phase, if you like. And at about day 11 they'll be spinning a silk cocoon around themselves and going through their metamorphosis for another 11 days or a little bit less, and then they'll emerge into the hive as a fluffy new little baby bee ready to go about the chores of the hive. And here we've got bee bread. You can see down there you've got pollen in the cells, all different colours. The bees have collected that from the flowers, flown back, dislodged it from their hind legs, pushed it down the cells with their head, topped it with some special sauce, their enzymes, added some honey to cap it off, and fermented it into a good sourdough bee bread. Easier to digest, just like when we eat sourdough.
And Cedar, we always get this question, but why are you not wearing gloves?
Okay, I'm not wearing gloves because it's a bit easy to beekeep without them, and after a while you get used to when the hive may be in a mood of stinging and when it's not. If I notice the tone change, I notice a few warning hits from the bees on my hands, then I'll put my gloves on. I don't particularly like getting stung, so I do protect myself. Some beekeepers don't mind getting stung, and they tend to never wear any protection in the form of gloves. It's really up to you, but I do suggest when you're beginning in beekeeping to wear your gloves, give yourself a nice gentle start in beekeeping. So a quick look for the queen on the frame, and that way I'm planning and hoping to leave the queen with the parent colony. A bit distracted answering questions, so I wasn't looking for the queen. Let's see if she's on here. Can't see her, but I can see what is a queen cup just there. Well done, Sophie. So that's not a queen cell yet, but it's a cup where, if I look down there, I can see there is no larvae in there, but a useful start nonetheless. I could put that across, and that would give them a slight head start on raising a new queen. So we might treat that as our first frame to go in to our new split. So we're simply taking a frame out of here, which will go back into that hive to replace it, and that will give some fresh real estate for the bees to build their comb on and relieve that primary trigger of swarming. So we've got our first frame for our new split. We've got some eggs down there. They could go ahead and start a colony from that, but it's a bit light on. Let's add a couple more frames.
Helen would like to know if you could put a new frame in the hive to stop them from swarming instead of doing a split.
Absolutely. So if you don't want to do a split, there's definitely ways you can mitigate the chances of swarming. One is you can take some honey away from the edge. So typically they've got honey on the edges. You can take those frames out, cut the comb out. If they're naturally drawn, you can just cut it right out there, put the frame back in the middle, and that will give some fresh area for the bees to build some comb, which they do very quickly, and some new cells for the queen to lay in. So that's a helpful thing you can do in the springtime too. Typically you do one of those each side and put those frames back towards the center, and that would be part of your spring management, and it helps cycle out old frames as well, because you've got this cycle of frames then going from taking out the honey, going back into the centre, which pushes frames that have been used for brood a lot towards the edges. When they've got no brood in them, you can then cycle out those frames. Beautiful. You can lift that one up. Sophie's never done this before. She's doing very well at getting in there and doing the hive split. Any questions, put it in the comments or answer away.
Kimberly would like to know what a drone cell looks like.
Well, let's see if we can find one for you. Now I'm seeing workers, lots of workers here because they're flush with the comb surface. See all of those? It's not honey, honey's up here and it's more translucent. Here you've got cappings that have the silk cocoon underneath them, so you don't get that light passing into the cell. Drones stick out a little bit further, and I'm not seeing any here. We'll typically see them towards the edges. So this is another nice frame of brood. Let's have a look and see if we have a queen on here. Lots of brood. This could be a great one to transfer across to the new split as well.
Is that the thing you
Okay. Show me again.
This is an interesting question. So Nat would like to know, how do you maintain a hive to just stay in the one brood box and you don't want more than one hive?
Okay, we've got a drone here, which is sort of more teddy bear shaped with eyes that touch together in the middle. That's how you can tell the difference when you're getting your eye in. So queens have a head just like the workers, but their body is longer. So you're looking for that, and she's got bigger legs as well. She struts around the place. So if you just want to maintain a hive without making a split, getting a second one, then you'll be the spring management you'll be doing is making more space in the hive by taking some honey away, harvesting honey, taking honey away from the brood box, making sure there's some blank space in the bottom, and or adding more boxes to your hive in the springtime in the form of another super, in the form of another brood box. Either or will create a bit of space. We've got another queen cup up here, so this could be a great one to transfer to the new hive too, giving them a slight head start. It'd be better if it had a queen in it, but we are not finding that, which is kind of good because this hive looks like it is not preparing to swarm just yet. There'll be a number of queen cells when they're deciding to swarm. Beautiful. You can go ahead and put that in the new split.
Another great question is, do the empty frames go into the center of the original hive and the new hive frames go in the, the other frames go into the center of the new hive?
Yes, spring management, you're trying to relieve space in the brood nest. So you'll be putting the frames back towards the center. Often good to checkerboard it a little bit. So if you're putting 3 frames in the center here that are blank, then you'll have some other frames in between. There's different schools of thought on that. So if it's cold still where you are, then you might like to keep your brood together. But if it's warm enough, you can checkerboard it a little bit like that. And if you're using naturally drawn comb, that'll help because you've got a guide of a nice straight frame either side of a new one, and that way you get nice straight comb in between. If you're putting them all together and then the blank ones on the outer edges, that can work too. It really depends on the situation. For the little split, because we're trying to relieve congestion here, I'll checkerboard it, but over here I'll put the brood frames together like this in the center. That way they have a going little colony in the center and they can progress out towards the edges. Okay, Sophie's pulling up another frame. Keep the questions coming in. Beginner beekeeping today, so we're answering questions. We're also doing a hive split, and Sophie's never done this before, so it's a great opportunity to ask questions and watch what she does. And often it's great learning because she will be asking questions along the way and using the hive tool in certain ways for the first time. Right now she's using it to lever the frame across, and now she'll be lifting it up. So she lifts it up temporarily and does a little juggle as she's swapping hands to get the other side loosened up. That's it. So see there, if we just go on the end bars, that way you're not digging into the comb. So past the end bar, which is this one here, you've got a nice free spot to lift. There are people that like digging into the comb to lift with certain different types of hive tools. This one is made so you don't have to do that. This is the J hive tool. Look at that, we've got a waggle dance happening here. We just lost that one. We've got pollen on their legs too, which is great. And another waggle here, so the bees are communicating with their dance, which is very cool. They do an amazing amount of communication. We had a question earlier, what do drones look like? And we've got some here. See how they're sticking out like lumps from the cell. The worker brood over here is flush and looks like that. So it's flush with the comb surface. The drone, because they're bigger, is sticking out these mounds. Notice this comb drifting a little bit, so it is a bit fragile. We want to make sure we don't tilt it too far. But let's just have a look and see if we can find the queen. So we're scanning around, often for her movement. She tends to stride and strut, and compared to the other bees, and she'll be clearing a bit of a path through the other bees. There's a bit of a wake around her. That's often the way we find her. The other one we're looking for is the shiny backplate, the thorax. Because she lives a long time, the hairs on it wear off, and she's got a shiny thorax compared to the other bees that have a bit of hair on them. Okay.
So we have a question from Aaron. Aaron transferred their colony into a new flowhive on Monday. There was a queen cell with a grub in it, uncapped. They need to go back into the brood box. However, what time frame do they roughly have to rub out the queen cell in order to manage the swarm factor?
Rub out the queen cell. Well, one method of swarm management is to destroy queen cells in a colony. The gestation of a queen is 16 days compared to 21, so you've got a bit less time. So roughly half of that will be in the brood phase, in the larvae phase, sorry. So you haven't got long if you do want to rub out, as you say, or remove that queen and take her to another hive. 16 days. Worker bees 21, drones about 24 days is their cycle. So that is another great frame to take into that new hive, because you've got a lot of brood on it. They'll all be emerging.
So down here, that corner.
What have we got down here? We've got
What is that?
drones sticking out, and there's some there in their larvae stage as well, so you can see the drones down the cells.
Very cool.
Any questions? Ask away.
Yeah, Cedar, if they swarm, what will you be left with?
Typically half the bees will leave with the old queen. The remaining hive usually would be would be raising another one by that point. So what you've got is half number of bees, hopefully a new queen that has to go on a mating flight and all of that. So you've got a bit of a downtime with suddenly not as many bees in your hive. So if you see that, if your hive has swarmed, you didn't get ahead of the curve, half of them flew off, then you'll need to look after that colony and make sure that the hive beetles don't take over. So if you've got hive beetles in your area, activate your oil tray down below, assist your bees to catch some of those beetles, and that will lessen the load that half the bees have to do to protect your hive from the hive beetles. So whenever a colony is weak, activate your oil tray if you have hive beetles in your area. That one can go in the split as well. So we've got plenty for the split now. We've got 3 good frames of brood, there's pollen stores on there, and we've got a bunch of bees that have come with it, so they're typically the nurse bees. A bunch of them will turn into foragers when they realise they don't have enough, and we will also move this hive quite close to the flight path of the returning foragers, so hopefully the returning foragers are getting shared out between the 2 hives. And you could go ahead and move that away and it'd be weaker, but in this case I'm going to leave it here so you can get some of the returning foragers as well. So next what we've got to do is put this hive back together, but what we're going to do is put the brood frames more central. So let's have a look at what we have here. We haven't found the queen yet. Hopefully she is with this hive. We know she's in there because of the nice brood she's been laying. But we could have missed her and she might be in the other box. So if we don't see her, we might go and have a look on those 3 frames we've taken. We're going to leave these 4 frames here, and we've got another one down here. So this hive will have the stronger, will be the stronger colony. We don't want to weaken it too much. We're getting good honey from it, and we will leave that primary trigger of swarming. So let's go ahead and have a look at this one just out of interest. See if it's got brood on it. See if it's got a queen on it. She can be a bit cheeky and hide in the corners of the brood box. She might be a bit camera shy.
And Cedar, we have a few questions about removing the frames and putting them back in. How do you not squish the bees? There's a lot of bees in there.
So one tip is to use a smoker to clear them out of the way. Now, our smoker hasn't been used for a while, probably gone out, so good idea to top it up.
There was a previous question of what do you put in the smoker, so this is a perfect example.
Beekeepers get fussy about what they put in the smoker, but for me I just use whatever's around. These are pine needles and leaves collected from just under the trees, and it's not a long-lasting fuel, but it's easy to light and works. If I was at my own apiary at home, I would strip some bark off the tallowood trees, which is a dense bark. I'd put that in on top once the smoker was going, and that would last a very long time. But in this case, we've got a garbage bin full of nice dry leaves and pine needles, and that will keep it going. But if you don't have that, any type of garden mulch usually works well. Steer away from things like newspaper that has a lot of coloured ink on it or anything like that. You don't want chemicals coming out. You want just nice leaves and things. This is getting hot. I'm being quite careful when I'm putting it in, but wear your gloves as you're doing this, and you can use your hive tool as well to pack it down. I'm just being careful not to touch the hot rim of the smoker, and also the top can get quite hot as well. Okay, now we're trying to get some of the pine needles out of the way so we can get the lid to close. Here we go. So getting back to your question, to move bees out of the way so you don't squash them, you can watch what happens here. As I'm smoking, the bees will clear out of the way, so then you've got a working area to pull out that frame. We've got brood all the way to the edge of this hive, which is fantastic. Did you find a queen over there?
Oh yeah, a lot of bees though.
A lot of bees. Brood all the way across, so this is fantastic. When you see that, it's clockwork brood pattern. That's what bee breeders look for, is just brood hard packed all the way across the frame. And that way all of these cells will emerge into fluffy new baby bees ready to do their chores. And when you've got a queen laying like that, it's a keeper. Beautiful. A little bit hard to see on the other side because there's so many bees on there.
I know.
Which is why we're in here today. We've got so many bees in this hive that we need to relieve some of the congestion. Now typically you would shake some of them off so that you could get a better look, because you can't really look for a queen when it's all
So cool, these dangles.
so multi-layered of bees. And you can't do a good look at the brood for pest and disease, which you're always looking out for odd anomalies in the brood. Okay, so to get bees off a frame, you need to do a short, sharp shake. Generally, all the movements in beekeeping are nice and calm, except for when you're trying to get the bees off something. Now, as I shake them, I'm going to have a look for the queen as the bees land down on the bottom board. Here we go. So that got a lot of bees off, and we can see that beautiful brood here. And I'm looking down here for a queen that's going to be taking quite different strides to the rest of the bees. Okay. Notice I shook it right over the box. If the queen's there, you want her to fall in, not out. Look at that beautiful brood pattern there. All beautiful brood. A lot of bees there. On this side we've got a pollen on this side, which you can see, give us a thumbs up, you can see the bee bread that they've made from their pollen down the cells. There's a bee there doing some work, packing the bee bread, fermenting it into a nice sourdough, ready to feed the young larvae. Very cool. So this one's going to go back in. Now we haven't found the queen. She might be in here somewhere. But we know she is here, so we might just decide to not bother to find her today. We could go through all the frames, or we might just decide to put this hive back together because we've got a grey rainy day. We don't want them apart for too long, they might get a bit grumpy about it.
We have a few more questions. Helen would like to know what it means if there are a lot of drones flying and hanging around the front of her hive.
Typically it means it's springtime. The bees raise a lot of drones in the springtime in order to spread the genetic material around. And those drones will take off each day and fly to a drone congregation area where hopefully a queen will fly by and they'll get to take part in a mating flight. So that's why they're raising drones. Now, if you've got a hive that's only drones, then your queen could have run out of sperm and might be a drone layer. If she doesn't have the ability to fertilize her eggs, then she can only lay drones or male bees. So make sure when you look at your hive that you have a lot of worker bees as well. If you've got a lot of drones too, then that is normal, especially in the springtime.
And once you've done the split, what stops the bees from the new box going back to the old box?
Okay, it's generally positioning, so we can use that to our advantage to throttle kind of the flight path towards one hive or the other. So right now, as soon as we've put these frames back in, we're going to bump this over a little bit and put the weaker split in the flight path, and that way we'll get a lot of bees returning to the small little split as well. Not completely necessary, but I find it useful in order to share those forages out between the two hives. Going sideways again, I can't help but just have a little look at all the frames while we're here. See what's going on the edge. Okay, we have drones on the edge. There was a question about drones earlier. And you can see here you've got a lot of drones on the edge, which is typical as you move out towards the edges to get more drone brood. These big lumps that stick out compared to these ones, which are the workers. We've got 24 days and 21 days they'll spend going from egg to be a bee. Okay, and we're looking at the other side. Beautiful. Okay. Any more questions?
Yeah, we had a question earlier about the super. It does look a little bit precarious sitting there on the railing. Why have you tipped it on its side that way?
Great question. So, if we were to put it down on this face, we might squash a bunch of bees. So if you are going to put it down on this face, make sure it's on top of something rather than just straight down on a flat surface, or you'll squash any bees that are on the underside here. I find it best just to roll it onto the front face, because that way there's no bees there to get squashed, and you're keeping the frames in the same plane so that nectar doesn't spill out. If you go onto one of these sides, then you could find you get a whole lot of nectar spilling out of your flow frames. So roll it in the same plane. Front face does that for you, and it's a very easy way to put it down somewhere. Okay, look at this. I've got a great, look how many bees there are in this hive. Look at this. Amazing, isn't it? Lots of bees going about their business. We're just having a look at these last few frames just because, and then we're going to put these hives back together, and we'll have our nice little split ready to be looked after. And with any luck, this time of year they get on their feet quite quickly, and we can start moving towards getting into super too. Lots of bees, lots of brood. So they brood all the way to the walls, which is fantastic. It's a perfect time for a split. We're ahead of the curve here. We haven't seen any queen cells apart from a few queen cups, but it doesn't look like they were about to swarm. So we're ahead of the curve here, which is great. And the one on the wall has a lot of brood too, so they just brood from one side of the hive to the other. Perfect to be taking a split from.
Aaron would like to know, is it good practice to remove the burr comb on the inside of the box whilst the frames are out?
You can go either way. Some people like to leave it, some people like to clean it up. If you clean it up, it's a bit easier to do your brood inspections. If you leave it, the bees have a bit of a reservoir of wax there to use as they need as well. So I tend to leave it for the purposes of knowing how the frames go back together if you want to put them in the same order. But sometimes I like to scrape it off just to make it a bit easier as well. You can go either way there. Wow. Looking good. So many bees. Springtime here in the southern hemisphere. The bees are buzzing, they're collecting a lot of nectar and pollen, and they're multiplying. And great time to do your hive splits as we're doing today. This is Sophie's first time doing a hive split.
And what time of day is the best time to do a split? And another question we had earlier was, what's the best time of day to introduce a nuke?
Okay, mid-morning to mid-afternoon on a warm sunny day with not too much wind is ideal, but you can't always get that. So here we are on a sort of a grey day, a lot of wind around, and we're going ahead anyway. If you live in the colder regions and it's a very cold time, then don't orphan brood from the hive for too long, or uncapped brood can suffer from cold shock. Very nice. Okay, lucky last frame, let's have a look there. Okay, I've noticed that the bees are getting slightly more agitated, so Sophie's doing the right thing, adding a little more smoke to the hive. After all, it is a grey, rainy day. Bees typically get more grumpy on grey, rainy, windy days. Just like humans. Okay. They're also responding to the smoke. Give us a thumbs up if you can hear that. But after a while they'll calm down. The effect of smoke is agitating at first and then calming. More brood here. Here we are on the edge, and look at that hard-packed brood over here. Amazing hive. We doubted this hive for a while because it did take a while to get going, but it's hit this spring and it has hit its stride. So patience paid off in this case. Brood all the way to the wall. Look at that. Not seeing any queen cells. If I did see a queen cell, I'd be putting it across into the split to give it a head start. But we've been through all the frames now. No queen cells, only a few queen cups. I've given 3 frames of nice brood over there. Hopefully they'll raise a queen. They can only... Yeah, that one can go back in. So what we're going to do is checkerboard it a little bit in this parent colony, and look at that, it's got some nice brood on it too.
And Cedar, we've had a few questions about your jacket and the clear view hood. Where can you get those?
That's an innovation we came up with just to make it a little bit easier to look down those cells and see the eggs. It can be quite hard looking through the mesh to get a good view of the eggs. So this is a nice clear view. It also comes with a mesh if you want to swap it out. Let's say you're in a really cold time and you're getting fogging on it. We have put an anti-fog coating. But nevertheless, you have options with this one to zip in the mesh or zip in the clear view. And it's just a lot nicer to look through. We've put a Velcro on top, which allows you to pull it closer to your face, which removes the reflection. When it's out there, you get a bit more reflection. When it's in here, you can see a bit better. So a little bit of adjustment there for you to adjust it to suit your needs. Okay, we're putting this hive back together now. We've got a lot of brood here. We've got 3 frames over there. I could do an even split and put 4 frames over there. But in this case, I want to keep this hive strong. It's doing a great job of producing. Wow, well done. Well done. There is the queen. So we now know which box she's in. There she was on the outside. Look at that. See how long she is compared to the other bee? So we've got a worker bee there and the queen there. See that? Really quite different. Her legs are bigger and she's got that shiny back plate showing she's worn the hairs off it. She's been around a while. Look at that. She's giving herself a little scratch as she goes. So there we go. We have Her Royal Highness, and we're going to put her back in the centre here to make sure she's in the parent colony where I'd prefer she was.
Cedar, I have a question. Would that be the same queen that I caught the split from the tree with, or would it be a new one by now?
It's quite possibly is the same queen, because she can last up to 6 years. There she goes, back into the middle there. Well done, well spotting. Okay, now we can move these frames together, being careful not to press comb against comb. It's important when you've got hive beetles in your area to make sure bees can access all comb surfaces.
We have had a couple of questions about cross comb. What do you do?
There she is again. She doesn't want to go down.
She likes the camera.
She's not so camera shy after all. Okay, she came straight back for another little party. Maybe she's like, what is this? This is whole new territory. Can't really find a spot to lay an egg, but you know. Okay. Well, I guess you can hang out there for a sec while we manipulate the frames. We're putting them close together.
She's still there.
Some people will actually put her in a little queen clip to make sure she doesn't get harmed while manipulating the hive. But in this case, I'm going to just push these frames together. A little bit of smoke here to clear the bees out of the way would be useful. And then I can push these end bars together and I'll put her right down there where she can safely be between the frames. If she'll stay. There she goes. No, doesn't want to stay. Doing a bit of communicating here, head to head with some other bees. Very good. She's performing very well. She's a keeper for sure. Her brood pattern is amazing. Hive's producing a lot of honey. They're gentle enough. Isn't it amazing to stare in at the world and watch the queen, watch the bees, see what they're up to? It's just a beautiful thing, and a lot of people get really into doing their brood inspections and looking after their bees and find it really quite a relaxing pastime to do your inspections and to watch the hive grow and to see what the bees are up to. And yeah, I think it's a beautiful thing to do and a beautiful thing to share with friends and family as well. It's always a good idea to have a few spare bee suits for somebody who might like to join in. It's often a pretty memorable thing that first time you get into a beehive. There she is again.
Chuck's asking, do you ever mark your queens, Cedar?
Look, I typically don't, but we do mark queens here sometimes because it is useful to makes it easier to find her, and it also, if you use the yearly colour code, you can work out how old they are as well. But I typically don't. I just spend more time looking for queens.
And Helen would like to know, does the queen sting?
She can sting. She doesn't have barbs on her stingers, so she can sting her rivals while they're still in their queen cells without dying. Whereas the other bees, when they do their stinging, the barb will often stay in. It will tear the stinger out of their body, and that'll be the end of their life. That's not a good idea for the queen, so the queen doesn't have barbs, so she can sting but not die. There she is again. Okay. So basically, but she doesn't tend to sting. She doesn't really have that job of protecting the hive from intruders. So you'll be unlikely to get a sting as the beekeeper, but she'll use her sting against rival queens. Okay, let's put those frames together. And we were going to drop a blank one in here. If you would get a spare frame from on the ground there. That's it. We'll checkerboard a little bit. So for those who are just tuning in, we're doing a split today. We've taken 3 frames of brood out, and now we're putting some blank frames back in. So that'll do for the smoke for the moment. And we're just going to drop the frame down like that, providing fresh new area. These frames just have the comb guide. If you want to pass me another one, or you can do the work of putting it in. We'll swap jobs after all. It's your hive and your hive split.
This one in there?
Yes, so you might need to make a little bit of space. I'll help you with a little bit of smoke to clear them out here and here. Here's, yep. So the aim of the game is we're relieving congestion here, taking a split over there. As long as there's eggs on those frames we put across there, fingers crossed they'll raise a queen and we'll have an extra colony. Now, if you were buying in a queen, then you would need to find the queen as we just did, and your queen would come in a little queen cage like this. You can order them in the mail. It should come with 5 escort bees or so, a block of candy at the end, and you would simply then put it in between the frames after about a day. So you leave it with no queen for a day so they realise they're queenless, and then you put this in like this, and you put it this way up with the candy block at the top so that any escort bees that might die in transit don't block the exit. And you'll point it slightly down though, so on a hot day if the candy melts it doesn't get all over your queen. So something like that would be perfect, choosing a spot where there's no honey that's going to squash into the frame, and your queen would then be released about a day later or two after the bees have chewed away the candy block, and that gives the hive enough time to get used to the new pheromone, so she's less likely to be balled and killed by the hive. Now, we're not doing that. We are just letting them naturally raise. We're taking a bit of a gamble. Hopefully the drones she mates with have friendly genetics and we get a nice, friendly, productive, hygienic hive. But we're taking a gamble. If you want to be much more likely to get a nice, calm, productive, hygienic hive, then order a queen from a breeder near you and use that to make your split. Okay, so well done. How many frames have we got there?
7.
7, and we need 8. So
okay.
let's use the smoker to clear bees away from the end bars, and what we're going to do is squash up the frames and put one last frame in, which, because we want new areas for the queen to lay, in this case to release the swarming, we're going to be putting it towards the centre. So let's put it here, being very gentle. We know the queen's in there, we do not want to squash her. Okay.
I had a question earlier that I missed from Michelle. She was asking, can you shake extra nurse bees into the new split?
Yes, you can. You can shake extra bees into your new split by shaking them off the frames here, and that's a typical thing to do as well. In this case I'm just going to move the new split across to collect some of the returning foragers. If they need to turn into nurse bees, they can.
Would you have to be careful about the queen, like knowing where the queen is when you did that?
Yes, it's always a good idea if you want the queen in this box, to have a good look before you be shaking the bees off. Okay, in we go with the last frame. So we've checkerboarded this to relieve congestion in the brood nest, and we've put those frames more towards the centre, the new ones. We're using foundation-less frames today, so they've just got the comb guide at the top. Bees do a great job of drawing the comb. We're never spinning these frames, so we don't need the wire reinforcing or the plastic foundation. You can just let the bees draw it perfectly natural for them. However, if you want to use foundation, you can. You can put a foundation sheet in here. You can wax and wire or plastic foundation. The frames are built to accommodate that as well. But in this case, I prefer just to use the comb guide. Let them draw their own wax, and that has benefits of letting the bees size the cells perfectly for themselves, and also you're not introducing any foreign wax at all. All the wax in this hive was produced by these bees. There we go. The frames had to move over a little bit to get that down, and there we go. So we've got all our frames in. Next we need to make sure they're squashed up tight, because bees are quite sensitive to the bee space. So you want those comb guides at the right distance. If you have them a bit apart, then they're more likely to build wonky comb or cross comb or comb in between frames. So to get them pushed across, we're using our hive tool again and just pushing against the edge like this. The same over here. Add a little bit of smoke for me, and we are moving across like that and here. And look at all these bees. There's so many bees in this hive. It's a great one to do a split, relieve that congestion, less likely to swarm, and we also get another hive out of it. Now we've got a lot of bees all over this side of the hive. We've got a lot of bees over here too. So let's move some of them in by using the bee brush. So with a sweeping motion, you can just go up and in like that. I don't like the brush very much. That's it. So let's pick up this excluder like this, because we don't actually need to sweep that, but do a firmer sweep, so you're trying to scoop them. Beautiful. That's it. You're scooping them in. Any bees that fall, they're all worker bees, so they can just work their way back into the hive.
And what's the best time of year to start a hive from scratch?
Generally, springtime is a great time to start. A lot of forage around, but you can start at other times of year. Get some local knowledge. Here we are in the subtropics. You can basically start any time of year. In the more colder regions, you'll want to be starting in the spring or summer, but get some local knowledge on that, because depending on how cold and how long your winters are, that'll get more specific about when you can start a hive. Having said that, depends which way you start as well. If you're starting with a nucleus, you've already got a going little hive, so you've got to jump on the season. If you're starting with purchasing a conventional hive off somebody, then you could do that any time of year and then transfer them into your brood box. Unless you're in a very cold area, you obviously wouldn't be doing your beekeeping when it's very cold and snowy, etc. So ask some local knowledge on when you can start beekeeping. Generally, when there's an availability of bees is the best time to get started. But get yourself prepared with your brood box, with your base, with your frames, so you're ready to go. You don't want to be caught out with the bees but no hive to put them in. Okay, we've got a lot of bees around, so we've got to be careful not to tread on them. They're working their way back up to the hive, and what we're going to be doing is sweeping the last bees in. You can keep doing that. We can use a bit of smoke to get them to go down. That's it. And you'll find with a bit of smoke and a bit of sweeping, there'll be an opportune moment to put the excluder on. Now when you've got a lot of bees like this, it does get a bit more challenging, and yes, you will end up squashing a few bees, and that's something to get used to in a way. All beekeepers do go through getting used to that, unless you're just extremely slow and extremely careful. Once you get a busy hive, you do end up squashing a few bees, and it's part of beekeeping. Bearing in mind that those worker bees live for about a month, so they will be replenished quite quickly, but obviously we work in ways where we minimize any bees getting squashed. Okay, keep going, keep smoking. I'll help you out a little bit here with the brush. We're just moving them in, moving them out of the way, and we're going to see if we can find an opportune moment to put the excluder down like this, and you can wiggle that down. And now we need to put this box on, but look at this box, how many bees there are there. Isn't that amazing? It'd be actually nice to knock some of them into the new split to get them out of the way. We might do that because there's so many there, it'd be hard to close up this hive. But if we had to, we would just smoke them and brush them and get them out of the way. But in this case, we might decide we're treading carefully not to tread on bees. I'm going to move them over. Now what's happening here, I can't quite see. Any bees in the way?
You're pretty clear.
Pretty clear. So we're just going to move this across. Try not to drop it into the garden below.
I'm not sure if the viewers are aware, but we are actually on a balcony right now with the hive.
We are on a balcony, and the balcony is a popular spot to keep bees, and it allows people to keep bees and do this beautiful thing of producing a beautiful food product and all the things that a hive can produce, even when you're in an area where you don't have land. So bees are wonderful like that. You can get real produce you can share with your friends and family, even from a balcony in the city. My sister kept bees in Berlin in a apartment a few stories up. On a little balcony, she had a number of hives. She was able to produce good honey without having land. So it's a wonderful thing. Now this little hive still needs another frame, doesn't it? Because we've got 7 in there and we want 8. Because we've got a small little hive starting out and they're going to be quite weak, we're going to keep this hive as a brood nest in the middle. We've just got 3 frames there. We didn't do an even split today. We wanted that hive to stay nice and strong so it can continue to really produce honey while the spring flow is on. So there we have our frames in. We want to again press those frames together and share any space either side. I don't know where the hive tool's gone. There it is. So that's it there. So why I'm preparing this is we're going to shake some bees in, and then we will be able to close this hive up. Now, if I move this over, we can get, if I take the side windows off, I can move it along. Now let's see. Always making up things as we go. But it looks to me like we could get a bunch of these bees into this hive just by moving this over. And we know that the queen's not there because we saw her in the other colony. Any more questions coming in?
We did have a question earlier about placing the hive in a small yard with children. Where would be the best place to place the hive?
Okay, so
the question was more, is there enough space in a small yard for 2 hives if you have children?
So a lot of people do keep bees in small yards. Obviously, when you're keeping bees in close proximity, you want a nice calm hive. And you want to be careful about their flight path. You don't want the flight path pointing right to where people normally walk. So you'll be situating your hive where the bees can fly up and away from it, out the entrance, up and away, without generally that flight path conflicting with where humans are. Pets is another consideration too. Pets usually learn pretty quickly. I've got goats at home and they've learnt that they don't mess around with the entrance of the beehive. It's quite a funny sight when they do, and they're there rubbing their noses on the ground getting the stings out. So here we go. I'm going to brush these in, and that'll give this little hive a few more bees. It'll also clear some of the bees away, make it easier to put this hive super back on the parent colony. So we're just going to sweep them in like that. Look at that, lots of bees for our new little split. There we go. That'll help out that colony. So I've taken some of these forages and given them to our new little split. So now we're going to choose an opportune moment to put this hive back together, but while we've been doing that and answering questions, a lot of them have moved up onto the excluder. So adding some smoke is a good idea at this point. The smoke helps clear bees away. A lot of them will go down into the bottom, and that'll just make it easier to put the box on without squashing bees. when you've got a busy colony you're taking a split from, often it's a challenge to get bees completely out of the way. Any more questions?
Cedar, someone would like to know if this whole live will be reposted as a video.
Yes, it'll stay there for you to watch later. If you want to follow some instructions, I've also got plenty of other videos showing you how to make splits, and if you do want a training course, have a look at the beekeeper.org. It's an initiative we put together with experts from all over the world, creating great content to train you from square one right through to even a deep scientific knowledge in beekeeping. So check out that, it gets rave reviews, free to try, and also an amazing fundraiser. Otherwise, on our YouTube channel, on our Facebook page, on all of our channels, we do have a lot of videos training you in all things beekeeping, and we're here each week to answer questions as well. Okay, so let's see if we can smoke some bees down. We're adding lots of smoke here to get them out of the way. Same here, a lot of smoke to get them out of the way. Smoke's a useful tool to move bees on, to calm bees, and so on. There we go. Out of the way, out of the way. And that way we'll be able to put the hive back together. We'll have our split, relieve the congestion in the parent colony, and given us another hive, which is a wonderful thing.
And Cedar, when will you put the super on the new hive? The new split that you've just done?
Well, it's a pretty weak split because it's only got 3 colonies, so it'll probably take a few months before we're putting on the super. So we'll wait till all of these frames are being used by the bees. And they're on the move today, aren't they? They're straight back out. There you go, come on, out of the way. Okay, seizing the opportunity when you've got less bees around. If you could brush any out of the way, that would be great. And we're just going to be throwing this heavy super right back on. If you find it is hard to lift, get some help from a friend. Look at that. A lot of bees. Okay, so I'm lifting this heavy super. Take it over. Sophie's going to brush the bees all the way and out from underneath here, on the bottom of this one too. And back on your queen excluder. Away we go. Trying to line it up as best you can, and then we'll be sliding it on the excluder to slide it back in so that these boxes are in line with each other. That's it. Give it a little slide. Beautiful. Trying to keep it nicely in line. And that's it. We've successfully limited the primary swarm trigger, which is so many bees in the hive, all the cells full of honey, nowhere for the queen to lay eggs, and when you look in the windows you can hardly see the comb. That's when they'll tend to swarm. Taken some frames out here, I've added some fresh ones here, fresh blank ones in the other box as well. So we can go ahead and put this one back together too. I'm going to grab the bee brush, Sophie, and brush any bees away. That's it, don't be shy about it. Brush them away, just from the edges. And then a good little trick is you go diagonal like that and slide into position, which will sweep some bees out of the way. Beautiful. So now we've got our 2 colonies, but there's one last step, and that's to move that one over and move this one close to the flight path. Now we could have done that when the hives were lighter without the super on, but because we have a couple of us, we should be able to do that by moving this colony over. Any more questions?
Mickey Williams would like to know, how often should they do an inspection?
So it's a little bit up to you. The only time you don't do inspections is when you've introduced a new queen. And if you've introduced a new queen, then you don't want to do an inspection for about a week. If you have, but any other time, provided it's not too cold, you can get in there and enjoy watching your bees grow. So some people get into it, they're inspecting them every week. Other people tend to do it as needed, but there is a requirement when you're keeping bees to make sure you're keeping your bees serviceable and you are looking for pests and disease. How often you need to inspect will be dictated by both what's going on with your hive and your local conditions. You may have a situation where you've got a lot of varroa around and you might need a treatment program which will require more intervention. So ask your local beekeepers, chime in how often you inspect your bees in your area. Now we're just going to slide over. I'm brushing a few bees out of the way so they don't get squashed down here. That's it. And Sophie, if you could just nudge from this side, we're going to slide this colony across, table and all. That's it. And the reason why we're doing that is we're going to move the little split in to the flight path so that it can share some too. I'm just going to lift it up because it's nice and light. If you could move that little bench across, then it will actually be nice and close to the returning flight path too, a little bit closer even. And that way the forages will be shared between the two colonies. Now the rain's come in. I'm going to wrap up now. Thank you so much for all of your great questions. The hive roof can go on top and we'll be back inspecting this colony and watching it grow. Keeping an eye on it, putting some oil in the oil traps below. When the colonies are weak, they need a bit more TLC. You want to look after them and make sure those pesky little hive beetles don't take over. Let us know what you'd like us to cover. We'll be back with more same time next week. Thank you very much for tuning in, and thanks Sophie for doing your first hive split live on camera.
Thanks, Cedar.